Question number 1. Suppression of anger is morally dangerous. Explain. The introduction paragraph. A Poison Tree is a poem which was written by William Blake and published in the year 1794. The poet clearly depicts the hazardous effects of covering up the nature of anger and the disastrous predicaments. Let's further analyze detailed in the following essay. The speaker relates two different scenarios talking about anger. First, he opens up his anger to his friend. He has got the opportunity to talk about his ill temper, and eventually, the anger disappears. Being open and honest is an extremely effective remedy for anger to go off. The speaker visualizes the positive impact of opening up. In addition, the vengeance is quickly brought to an end. Clearly stating the cause for an anger helps to reduce its unhealthy issues. Further, he depicts that if you are angry with your friend, you try to convince your heart and try to forgive. You end up your anger against them. On the other hand, when you have an anger with an enemy, it takes time to manage your anger. It cannot be controlled in a possible way. In fact, your vengeance starts to grow. It reaches its peak level until you understand the negative impacts of it. Further, the poet states that suppressing of emotions leads to dangerous outcomes. The suppressed anger is compared to a tree which is poisoned. Gradually, the tree grows and finally bears fruits. A poison tree is only capable to bear poison fruits. To illustrate the disastrous impact, the writer chooses to compare the growth of the tree. The vengeance is grown as a tree which is offering poison fruits. The enemy finally lies dead under the tree. This shows the increased anger which fed up the growth of the tree. The poet suggests and warns that anger leads to any extreme. Further, the speaker is happy finding his enemy not alive anymore. Here, the poet states the dark side of a human being. Moreover, the anger changes the nature of human and it is a main pathway to arise conflicts and violence. The poet has clearly depicted the effect of lack of communication among people. The speaker is having no chance to open up towards his enemy day and night. Gradually, the anger increases. The vengeance hits the peak level because of the suppression of anger. The poet artistically and deeply portrays the dark side of a human and shows the damage caused. He further states that the anger between friendship can be easily forgiven, but the vengeance between enemies cannot be forgotten or forgiven. And the vengeance is continued. The fruits bared by the tree are fully poisonous. The fruit signifies the evil nature in the heart of the poet. This state is a point in which it cannot be reversed back to normal. And the final day comes for the enemy, and he has ate the fruit of evil and anger. The speaker has used his anger as an evil fruit to take revenge upon his enemy, who is the reason for his tears and fears. So the time has come for the weapon for what it has made for. The conclusion paragraph. Therefore, the poet has portrayed in his poem that anger may lead to any extreme. It can even be a reason for murder. Anger and vengeance shouldn't be grown inside the chest. Rather, it could be exposed to the relevant so the unwanted dangers could be easily minimized. The end. Thank you.
Question number 1. Bottling up emotions creates cycle of the negativity and violence explained with reference to the poem A Poison Tree by William Blake. A Poison Tree is a short and deceptively simple poem which was written by the British poet William Blake in 1794. Speaker emphasizes how suppressed anger turns into destructivity force when it is not communicated properly. The poem highlights how anger brings violence and destructions when it is not communicated with the concerned party openly. Let's analyze them in the following paragraph. In the first stanza of this poem, the poet describes about two scenarios where he was making a proper conversation with his friend. Poet's anger comes to an end, but when he has an anger on his enemy and he is not ready to make a proper conversation. Day by day, the anger is a growing. Therefore, bottling up the emotion leads to the growth of uncontrolled anger. According to the second stanza, the poet still didn't make a proper conversation. In contrast, he was growing in a poison tree by watering his trees. Every day, the poet thinks about his enemy and he cries and he sunnies it with smiles. He keeps a fake smile on his face and he's hurt. He has vengeance on his enemy. This stanza also shows us if we bottling up our emotions, it will help to grow fear, cheer, etc. However, the poet grow the poison tree until it's giving a bright apple. Even though the apple may bright, it is poisoned by the poet's cruel mindset. That poison's mind becomes as an apple, and while his enemy ate the apple, then he died. After seeing his enemy's death, and the poet becomes happy. Enjoying on his enemy's death shows how humanity changes towards to violence. Even the animals never glad at another animal's death. The conclusion paragraph. This poem clearly expresses us if we make a proper conversation, not only with our friends, but also our enemy, it will help to live a worthy life. Bottling up emotions surely creates sight of the negativity and violence. This poem is a great example for that. The end. Thank you.
Answer number 3, A Poison Tree. A Poison Tree poem was written by English poet William Blake in 1794. The poet emphasizes how suppressed anger turns into destructive force when it's not communicated properly. The poem highlights how anger brings violence and destruction when it's not properly communicated with the concerned party openly. Let's analyze the poem through the following paragraphs. The poem indicates that the nature of communication leads to the type of consequences which are generated due to various emotions. Blake originally gives A Poison Tree the title, which means the Christian forbearance. More on the significance of the earlier title below. In summary, the speaker of the poem tells us that when he is angry with his friend, he simply tells his friend that he is annoyed and he puts an end to his bad feeling. But when he was angry with his enemy, he didn't air his grievance to this point, and so as a result, the anger grew. Whereas he can trust our friends with our true feelings and be honest with them. A foe is someone who, almost by definition, we cannot be so honest with. The title is the metaphor of this poem for his anger to a tree that he watered with fear and resentment. Then, more curiously, he says that the false smiles he put on whenever he saw an enemy, it acted like sunlight helping a tree to grow. By bottling up his anger, he made it worse, and by putting on soft, deceitful wiles, his anger continued to grow and morphed into something more devious and need for vengeance. He is smiling at his enemy while he is plotting his revenge. The implication of this poison tree is that anger and hatred start to eat away at oneself. Hatred always turns inward, corrupting into self-hatred. Speaker has observed that it's not merely an speaker's foe who is poisoned by the speaker's actions. The act of poisoning his enemy diminishes and corrupts him too. The brooding enmity and resentment borne by both parties not only diminish the other party but rebound upon the bearer. Hatred eats away at us as much as it affects our voice because the speaker was forced to hide his anger. It made him act in a deceitful and false way, and thus his anger for friend led him to despise himself for being driven to act deceitfully. An apple sprouts from this poison tree of anger. This apple bright attracts an attention of his enemy, who then sneaked into the speaker's garden one night and ate the apple from this tree. When the speaker friends his enemy and next morning his foe is lying dead under the tree, having eaten the poisoned fruit. This powerful and curious little poem is about the power of anger to become corrupted into something far more deadly and devious if it is not aired honestly. The enemy may have stolen the apple, but he was deceived into thinking that something deadly and poisonous was something nice and tasty. In other words, both the speaker and his foe are deluded. The speaker because he seems unaware that he is diminished himself by his actions, and the foe because he little realized that the apple he stole was poison. Since the apple represents human enmity and resentment, the line, and he knew that it was mild, resonates bitter irony because in the actual fact, both the foe and the speaker failed to realize that the poisoned apple has infected both of them. Their mutual hatred has corrupted them both in the same manner. The fact that the speaker has shunned history with smiles, this implies that putting on a friendly front and being two-faced towards our enemies grows the tree. Pouring the anchor, our sense of having been drawn into the ground. Like watering the soil is only a way to solve or cure the hurt we feel. Only by bringing such hurt out into the open and confronting our foe. In other words, Blake does not contempt anger, is invariably self-destructive or even hate. Sometimes it's right to hate things which seem to accept our moral sensibility, but such contempt and anger become corrupted when they lead us to deceive because such behavior reduces our own moral constitutions. End of the poem. Represent of the speaker trumped over his foe in positive terms, but it's not mixed victory. He was succeed in defeating his enemy because his foe has shown his hand first, his enemies deceitfully. Behavior in sneaking into the speaker garden to steal the apple causes the foe's downfall, leaving the speaker victorious and his enemy is destroyed. Conclusion part. Finally, as we know, the Newton's third law states, when we hurt someone with deceit, it will be repeated to us with multiple acts. So we want to be an open-hearted, honest, with pleasure mind. It gives us very satisfied life. So we want to express our emotion in proper ways rather than keeping them inside. The only way to stop the disaster caused by anger is to communicate openly. Therefore, suppression of anger is morally dangerous because it leads to conflict and violence. Thank you.